Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be discussing Nightfall by Daniel Barnett, which is the first book in the Nightmareland Chronicles. There are, I think, like 5 or 6 of these out so far. I think 5, actually, now that I say it. Of at least 12, this is ongoing. But I decided to pick this up because it had been recommended very, very highly by Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and I believe that he had originally picked it up from Leslie at the Nerdy Narrative. So just shout out to both of them for talking about this and about how good it is, because this was awesome. The first one is just a novella. So it was a really quick read. I think like the average time to read it on the Kindle was like 2-ish hours, so not super long at all. And I decided to throw it in because I've been trying to put in some more short books in between as I'm reading some longer books, just to kind of break things up a little bit. So this story just kind of jumps right in and starts with it, but the base premise is basically something, it's not explained and it sounds like it won't be for some time, but something has essentially caused like the sun to just like disappear. And so it just becomes like night, but like blacker than night all of a sudden. And it has all kinds of just odd effects on people, and some people kind of like go a little bit crazy because of how it happened and their brains just can't wrap their heads around it. But the story we're mostly following centers on 2 different characters, which are John, who's kind of the primary character, and then Mariah, who's also involved. And it's hard to talk too much about their involvement without going into spoilers, but John is really this basically, like, you get the feeling that he's a very dangerous, very violent man. Pretty early on it seems that he is an alcoholic, but who is currently sober and like trying to stay that way. We get some small hints at his past, things he might have done, like issues with his family, and just a lot of the stuff that's made him into the very cold person he is today. Mariah is a bartender, and we also learn pretty quickly about a lot of trauma in her life. And these things are brought up and talked about and done partially with real time, partially with some flashbacks, and it's woven together so well to just give you this kind of just like eerie feeling of seeing it. But the first thing that I really want to say really impressed me is just how well Barnett has done with just making you feel like these are real people. The things being talked about, the experiences, from just the monotonous parts of life to the much more important parts, and the wide range of emotions you see with these 2 main characters, as well as sometimes very brief POVs from other people as well, kind of dealing with everything. The just whole range of emotions that are emotions that are explored here is just fantastic, and it made this feel so real. And also the prose is kind of odd. The only thing I can kind of say is it reminded me of like darker Neil Gaiman in a way, just because some of Gaiman's prose is kind of like different but very descriptive, and also he does a great job at really like making you feel like a character is a real person. So I think that's kind of why I went that route, even though the storytelling very different. Very, very different, and so it's not necessarily the same, but just some of the strengths, the things that I really like about Gaiman were present here as well, which is why I bring that up. Now, like I said, the kind of the Nightfall, which is why it's called that, does have a lot of strange effects, and we see people who just kind of like lose their grip, and it seems like some of it might be a bit more supernatural. Like I said, it's not really delved into what's going on, but we definitely get some hints of this, something supernaturally caused this. But we see all these different people kind of going crazy or like latching on to different things. There's a lot of violent things that happen as well because of that, and just in some of the flashbacks also. So fair warning, this does get pretty dark, and it gets pretty dark pretty quick. And the descriptions are just so vivid that just reading this whole story was such a visceral experience. I could see everything so clearly, even the things I really didn't want to, with some of the descriptions, but everything I could see in my head. And this really so much felt like something that absolutely should be adapted into a TV show. I literally like this novella being like the pilot. I could see it, I could hear it, and not many books that I've read have really had me like that much where I could just completely envision it. I really like authors that are extremely descriptive and can really draw me in with that. But with this story, it was so real that I was seeing everything happening in my head. I was hearing it. I was envisioning these scenes as if it was like something like on TV. And that is just, I mean, just a bravo at how well that was done. So this, I should note, is I think technically falls under horror, is how I've heard other people describe it. It didn't, I don't really read horror, so I don't know how correct that is. I would say I think there's definitely some of those elements there, but it felt more almost, wow, nothing at all that happened was sci-fi. It felt kind of like a something you'd see Sci-Fi Channel, like we're on just normal Earth, and then like the sun goes out, like things that would happen. So it felt kind of like a mix of that, definitely with some horror and some like action, mystery, thriller elements thrown in. There's a lot going on, and it's just the way the story is told. There's a lot that's mysterious that we don't know what's going to happen. And from reading the author note at the back, that's very, very intentional. It sounds like Barnett is a huge, huge believer in just slowly revealing things and kind of letting you go over it in your mind until you're like going crazy trying to figure out what's happening before he really just reveals things, and doesn't like to reveal too much at once. And you know, normally I would say like I'm okay with that to an extent. I hate when like a story drags out something too long, but this was such a short time, and we really got very few details in a lot of ways. Even some like major pieces of characters were revealed pretty late in the story, but the way it's designed and the things it introduces, there is just so much that can happen. And really, I'm so interested to see what's going to happen next in this series, because I most certainly will be continuing this series. This opening book was an easy 5 out of 5 for me. I don't know, I've never read anything quite like this, and this is why I like to try different things, and I've been trying to be better about doing different things, reading things that are out of my comfort zone. This is certainly not like anything that I normally would read, and that's why I have to generally just say, like, go read this book. I don't know why almost nobody apparently is talking about this. I looked up books to see how many were out on Goodreads, and there are barely any reviews for any of the books, like less than 100 even for the first one. So it's like, I don't know why this is not out there, but this absolutely should be, because this isn't even like a debut. Like, it sounds like the author's been around for a bit, but this is just so good. And that's, I have to say, without even getting super detailed, it is just so good. As Alan would say, so good, you know, but it's really just, it's something that is really well written. If you're not into like a very dark setting with a lot of violence and kind of some of those elements, this may not be for you, but otherwise, if you like that, especially if you're somebody who is like big into grimdark in the fantasy genre, this might be something you enjoy. It has a lot of dark elements and just has a very dark kind of just dastardly tone. You don't know a whole lot of what's going on, but you're just engulfed in this darkness of this very real seeming world in a very real seeming town. The characters are just, they seem like real people. There's actually a lot of specific references to like brand names, things like that. Like it'll specify what the brand of a backpack is, or a certain type of shoes, things like that, that normally I'm actually not a huge fan of. I don't know, for some reason when people like brand drop in books, it sometimes will annoy me, because usually when I'm reading fiction I want it to feel like fiction. This kind of story though is more powerful because of the fact that it does seem just so freaking real. It has a lot of stuff that makes it feel pretty well current. And people reacting in very realistic ways. Without getting into any spoilers, like cell phones exist. When some weird catastrophe happens, you betcha people are going to be on their cell phones, and like things like that happen. And so it doesn't take the route of like, oh, there's no technology, nobody can figure out what's going on. All of the reasons why like certain people aren't in contact or why things are going wrong completely makes sense, because technology does exist. The author is not ignoring that. He's using that to further just make this feel like a real story. And once again, the way things are described and just the way the narrative goes, it doesn't just outright tell you everything, but you can really just get a strong sense for who people are, and sometimes things as they are happening, even if it's not outright said. There's a particular scene involving a police officer, And there was something later that was mentioned that kind of really, filled in why things happened the way that it was. But when I was reading it, even though it didn't explain this important piece to it, I'm just like, this is 100% the situation. I can completely tell from the context, even without that bit of information. And it is so well done. And like I said, this is such a quick read. I'm pretty sure I got this for like 99 cents on like the Kindle store or something at some point. I don't know what it would be now, but it's definitely not super expensive. I'm probably gonna buy the rest of the series that's out on Kindle and continue reading them probably pretty soon because I'm very curious. I'm tempted to like slowly read it though, just because there's a lot more to come. But I couldn't believe how good such a short amount of work was. I even specifically read a couple of novellas lately, and with both of them, they had the problem of they just simply weren't long enough. Too much was tried to fit in, or like things just weren't done, or things had to be rushed because it was a novella. And this didn't do that. I usually don't like novellas because of all the things I just said. And even I read recently one by Kate Elliott, who's an author I really enjoy, and it was good. I did like it, but it just suffered from some of those novella syndrome type things. This doesn't. Now, to be fair, this is a setup book, so this is starting a series and setting things up. But honestly, despite the fact that I read this super quickly and it was very short, it felt complete and it never once felt like it was rushing. The story actually moves surprisingly slowly for the fact that it's a novella. But it's not like this is slow and boring. There's stuff constantly happening, but we're just kind of like slowly moving through to the setup for the next book. And it felt very lifelike. It's kind of hard to explain. I really like a lot of slower books. This is, like I said, not one of them. It pulls you in pretty quickly, and you're not really sure what's happening at first, because even the whole fact that like it's nighttime and like the sun's gone is not outright said for quite a bit into the book. But I mean that's the base premise, so I'm not considering that a spoiler, even though it doesn't outright say it. And I kind of already knew that was, because once again that's the premise, so I knew to expect that. But the author doesn't come right out and say it, and especially the main character we're following, the way he looks at the world definitely affects how things are seen in his POVs and when we're looking at him. And it's just it's a really interesting writing style. But once again, I absolutely am saying just go read this. Like seriously, everybody should read this. And I think there's so much that people would like. I'm like, oh, if you like these types of things, definitely read this. And like I said, it's harder because this is not the sort of thing I normally read. So that's just where, even though like I normally do fantasy with like a little bit of sci-fi, this is kind of a hybrid own other thing of like horror with maybe some sci-fi in it. But in a real world with real technology, like things I don't normally even care for that much in books, but just it works so freaking well here. I feel like I've been rambling a little bit, but I was so surprised at how much I loved this, because Andrew recommended it very highly, and I tend to have really similar taste. I had started reading something else, looking for something short, and I was not feeling it at all, so I jumped into this and remembered I had it on my Kindle, and it's really short, it's really quick, so if you have read this, definitely let me know your thoughts on it, if you also loved it, or maybe if you didn't, as I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions on this as well. And if you haven't, go read it, and then come back and let me know what you thought about it as well, and hopefully that you liked it as much as I did. But I am so excited to continue reading these, and I'm already just automatically curious to check out this author's other work as well, because of the fact that this was just so well written, just so interesting and very drawing in. So those are really my thoughts on Nightmareland and the first book in that series, Nightfall by Daniel Barnett. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Check the link in the description for a link to the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to join us there and chat about all kinds of things, maybe even this book or all kinds of other books. And we have a lot of other stuff always going on there as well. Great community, a lot of engagement, and just a really fun place to be. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.